In 1956, a New Zealand pharmacist looked at the cap of his fountain pen and had an idea that would go on to save hundreds of millions of lives. But the needle itself is not a modern invention. It is one of the oldest tools humans have ever made. Older than the wheel, older than farming, older than written language itself. This is the story of how a sharpened sliver of bone became one of the most important objects in human history. About 50,000 years ago, in a cave in Siberia now called Denisova Cave, an extinct human relative carved a needle out of bird bone. It was nearly 3 inches long, with a hole punched through one end for thread. It is the oldest needle ever discovered, and it still looks like it could be threaded and used today. This was not a lucky accident. Making a needle like this took real skill, grinding bone down to a fine point, then carefully drilling an eye through solid material without snapping it. Why did this matter so much? For the eyed needle, early humans wrapped animal hides around their bodies for warmth. That was it. With a needle, they could pierce hide and pull thread through it, stitching pieces together into fitted, layered clothing. Fitted clothing meant humans could survive in freezing climates they never could have lived in before. Some researchers believe the needle is one of the key reasons humans were able to spread out of Africa and into the Ice Age landscapes of Europe and Siberia. A tool small enough to lose in the dirt helped our species conquer the planet. For tens of thousands of years, needles stayed simple: bone, ivory, and wood. Archaeologists have found needles like this on nearly every continent: in China, in France, in South Africa, each culture inventing the same basic tool independently. Then, around the 4th century BCE, something changed in China. Craftsmen began forging needles out of metal instead of bone. Metal needles were stronger, thinner, and could be sharpened to a point that bone simply could not match. By around 900 AD, Chinese metalworkers had developed genuinely high-quality steel needles, centuries ahead of anywhere else in the world. That steel-making knowledge slowly traveled west. By the 10th century, it had reached Spain, where a technology called the Catalan furnace had allowed Europeans to finally produce steel needles in real volume. From Spain, the knowledge spread into Germany and France. England, however, lagged behind. For centuries, English tailors and seamstresses had to import their needles from the continent at a premium price. That changed in 1639 in a small English town called Redditch. A local craftsman set up the first real needle-making workshop in England using a technique called wire drawing, pulling steel through a series of dies to stretch it into a perfectly even, thin strand. It is essentially the same core process used to manufacture needles today. The industry exploded from there. By the 1650s, needlemakers in London were organized enough to form their own guild. But it was Redditch that became the center of the world. By 1847, factories in the Redditch district were producing roughly 50 million needles every single week. By 1862, that number had nearly doubled to almost 100 million a week. At its peak, this one small English town was responsible for around 90% of all hand-sewing needles used on Earth. 15,000 people worked in the needle trade there. During the Second World War, Redditch alone was producing more than 45 million needles a week to keep military uniforms and equipment stitched together. Think about that for a second. A tool invented in a Siberian cave 50,000 years ago had become an industrial product, mass-manufactured by the millions, shipped across the entire British Empire. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe. We dig into stories like this every week, the hidden history behind everyday objects, so you don't want to miss what's coming next. While Redditch was mass-producing sewing needles, doctors were working on a very different kind of needle, one that could go inside the human body. In 1844, a Scottish physician named Alexander Wood began experimenting with a hollow needle that could deliver medicine directly under the skin. By 1853, Wood, along with a French surgeon named Charles Gabriel Provost, working independently, had built the first true hypodermic syringe, a hollow needle fine enough to pierce skin attached to a plunger. Wood's very first patient was an elderly woman suffering from severe nerve pain. He injected morphine directly into the site of her pain, and it worked. The age of injectable medicine had begun. For the next 100 years, though, there was a serious problem. Syringes were made of glass and metal, and they were expensive. So hospitals reused them over and over on different patients after sterilizing them by hand. When sterilization wasn't done properly, and it often was not, diseases spread from patient to patient through the very needles meant to heal them. The fix came from an unexpected place. In 1952, a pharmacist and veterinarian named Colin Murdoch was on a flight in New Zealand when he pulled the cap off his fountain pen. Looking at the pen's tip, he realized a syringe could be built almost the same way, cheap, made of plastic, and designed to be used exactly once, then thrown away. By 1956, Murdoch had built a working prototype of the first disposable, pre-filled plastic syringe. New Zealand's own health department initially rejected the idea, calling it too futuristic. But within a few decades, disposable syringes became the global standard. Today, an estimated 16 billion injections are given around the world every single year, and the vast majority use a needle that is opened once and discarded forever. This single invention is one of the most underrated public health breakthroughs in modern history. Before disposable needles, reused syringes were a direct pathway for spreading blood-borne disease between patients. Today, unsafe needle reuse still happens in parts of the world without access to disposable supplies, and the World Health Organization estimates it contributes to roughly 1.3 million deaths every year, largely through hepatitis and HIV transmission. Murdoch's plastic syringe is the reason that number is not dramatically higher. The needle now lives a strange double life. On one side, it is still a humble sewing tool, though the industry has shifted dramatically. Most of the world's sewing needles are now manufactured in Asia, and England's once mighty Redditch trade has all but disappeared. On the other side, the needle has become one of the most important tools in modern medicine, delivering vaccines, insulin, anesthesia, and blood tests to billions of people every year. Researchers today are even developing microneedle patches, arrays of needles too small to feel, designed to deliver vaccines without a single prick of pain. The needle's story spans 50,000 years, 6 continents, and nearly every major turning point in human history. It was there when early humans learned to survive the Ice Age. It was there when England built an entire industry around a strand of steel wire. It was there when medicine learned to reach beneath the skin. And it is there right now in your sewing kit, in your doctor's office, in your arm at your last vaccination. A tool small enough to disappear between your fingers quietly shaped the survival, the health, and the daily life of our entire species. If this story surprised you, subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden histories behind everyday things.